So just wanted to make sure David should be here anytime soon as well. Not now. It should work. So, oh my God, it's delayed. Just wanted to make sure David should be here anytime soon as well. Okay. Not now. It should work. Okay. So, not now. It should work. Okay. So, Dushan, we're live. Oh my God, it's delayed. Just wanted to make sure. But it's delayed. So I'm just gonna pause the streaming. But I'll send you the link if you want right now so you can check it out. Just make sure to mute it because it's a little bit delayed to our actual conversation.
Yeah, because when it's on, I can hear it like 1 or 2 seconds later, so it just kind of gets me confused.
Exactly. Yeah. So I pause the. I'm just gonna play it, but I'm just gonna mute it. But I just, in case you want to see it, like I'm gonna send it. I'm just gonna wait for it. David should be here in a second. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna put okay, wait, hold on. How are things in Belgrade? You're muted, buddy.
You mean corona-wise or just in general?
Corona, I mean, overall, here it's pretty crap. They introduced like new measures yesterday, like bars and restaurants have to close for 2 weeks. So,
oh, wow, that's just
yeah.
like brutal. Yeah, here it's more flexible, but I guess they're introducing new measures as well because like the winter season is almost coming. So yeah, pretty much they are being cautious, I guess, but I think it's smart. So we'll see what happens. But yeah, in the street, everything seems normal still. So yeah, that's something.
It's Belgrade. No one really gives a crap.
Exactly.
Yeah. All right. But I just want to see how the live stream looks because it looks kind of delayed. It'll be okay.
I mean, I guess it's the same if it's delayed or not because.
Let me just check the audio. Hold on.
For 2 weeks.
So, oh, wow. That's just like brutal. Yeah, here it's more flexible, but I guess they're introducing new measures as well.
Okay. No. David, hello. How are you?
Hi.
Good.
Long time no speak. How's everything?
Long time no see, yeah.
Where are you right now? Sweden?
Yes, I am in Stockholm right now. Right, I'm gonna rename myself here. It's a bit more official.
Yeah.
There we go. Yeah, I'm in Stockholm because I started my master here at the Stockholm School of Economics 6 weeks ago, actually, and absolutely loving it so far.
Yeah, glad to hear how things in Sweden, like with the whole pandemic and everything.
You don't notice it at all. Actually, they're so liberal in their strategy that like no one is wearing masks. You can do whatever you want. Just today, actually, I noticed it for the first time because my classes for today and tomorrow were canceled because there was a corona case at school. And I guess even in my program, because the others are having classes like normal and my classes were canceled. But besides this, I mean, we had an amazing introduction week with lots of drinking activities, pub crawls and everything, which I didn't think would be possible before I got here.
Nice.
So jealous because I have everything online.
Yeah.
I mean, like,
are you in Edinburgh then, or are you?
I'm in Edinburgh right now. Yeah. Don't really know why, but yeah.
Yeah, like for me, it is if things close down here, I will move to Switzerland back just until like stuff opens up again.
Yeah, I mean that makes sense.
Yeah, because like I'm living in a small student housing here, and like I don't want to spend quarantine on 25 square meters. So
Where would you go in Switzerland, to St. Gallen?
no, I would go to my parents' place in Zug.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
All right. Oh, by the way, David, so I sent you the live stream link to your WhatsApp.
Yeah.
So you can check, we're live on YouTube. It's a little bit delayed, so you can have it open if you want, but just maybe mute it. I'm just checking to see if it's actually running okay. It is running okay. Look, I'm going to put some of the audio.
Place in Zug.
Oh, okay. All right. Oh, by the way, David, so yeah, it's just a bit delayed, but also you cannot see who is here. I'm the host, so technically I should be able to. I don't know how to do that, but basically, yeah, it's going to be on YouTube where people are going to be watching, not really through Zoom. So
okay.
it's just going to be the four of us, and there will be people watching. We just can't see that because it's going to be on the YouTube stream, and then I think afterwards I get the.
Will they be able to ask questions?
Yeah. So there will be a if you go to the YouTube thing, which is on the right hand side, there's like a chat thing. So there, I'm just gonna put something right now saying, "Welcome everyone."
See, one can see my T-shirt. I'm quickly gonna take that off. May I have a look at my beautiful wall in the meantime?
Oh my God, perfect.
But yeah, how do you like plan to run it? Do you want to like pick up like? Shall we go through the like schedule that you sent us?
Yeah, sure. Daniel will be here in a couple minutes. He said he'll be here in 2:55. But basically, yeah. So I'm gonna kick things off. Introduce myself, sort of introduce what we're doing here, and then I'm gonna pass it on to 1 second. I'm gonna then pass it on to Danny, then to you, David, and then to you, Dushan. Honestly, take as long as we want. We have 1 hour slot. I don't think we're gonna use a whole hour. I think my estimate is gonna be about 45 minutes.
Perfect.
So take as long as you want. And then, like I said, also in the document, it's a great chance to promote either MWT International, Belgrade, Edinburgh, whatever.
Yeah.
Right. So yeah, just do the introductions. Then after that, I'm gonna maybe focus it on you and Danny, David. Basically for you guys to talk about, the MWT International project. What do you guys do? Why? Sort of what skill set can you give to potential participants? Why you decided to sort of like expand this from, just Switzerland to Costa Rica, Edinburgh, Belgrade, Italy.
Yes. Okay, great.
Also, that should yeah, go on. Sorry.
But is it are you gonna just give us the floor and we can talk about what we like, or is it like you didn't prepare any questions or so?
I can throw you a couple questions. Would you want me to do that?
No, only if there is something that you want us to say. But because I had a quick call with Danny this morning, and we were not sure if you like wanted like a Q&A thing with us, but
no,
just totally fine. So we just, I mean, we talked, or we were very used to talk about Moldova, so we can
exactly. I think it's just more of an organic conversation kind of style.
Yeah. Good.
And then after that, I think we're going to focus more a little bit on the topic. So then I'm going to pass it on to Dushan, who is a bit going to talk about, negotiations at the WTO level. How do you reach that sort of consensus? We all know how that's extremely difficult, especially in lieu of a pandemic and the decline of multilateral trade, versus regional trade. So Dushan, maybe we can talk about those challenges a little bit. Why do we need to keep negotiating at the multilateral level? Then it's gonna go over to me. I'm gonna talk a little bit about sort of, as a negotiator, how you need to balance your national interests versus the whole multilateral agenda, especially in organizations like NATO, WTO, which are consensus-based organizations. And I'm going to make a very specific case. So for example, the national security rule with the COVID vaccine. And then also, Danny's here. Danny?
Hi, guys.
We cannot see you.
Yeah, just a sec.
Really?
I love it. Okay, so can you hear all of us? Okay, Sounds good. So we're just running a bit through the agenda. Basically that, yeah, I'm gonna kick things off. I'm gonna send you right now the YouTube stream because we are live right now. It's a bit delayed, so you can have it open if you want, but just make sure to mute it so it doesn't cross over the audio. And then there will be able to people will be able to ask questions, etc. We can't see people watching, but right now, because I'm the host, there are about 10 people watching right now. Already, yeah.
Like, are they seeing how we're preparing, or?
Yeah, I mean.
Oh my God.
But basically, so yeah, we're just gonna go through the agenda, and I think the most important part is I sort of broke it down like for Dushan to speak, David and Daniel to speak, for me to speak. But if you have any input on any of the conversations, feel free to jump in. It's not like a strict structure. I think I told David I want it to be as organic as possible. So yeah, just take your time.
I was about to ask, are there some questions or like some political topics that we are not supposed to cover whatsoever? But if there are people watching already, I guess.
I mean, I don't think you're gonna full blown out like Serbian nationalist rant. So I think we're gonna be okay.
You guys know that people are already watching, so you better watch out what you're saying already now.
Exactly.
Yeah. But yeah, no, don't worry.
Yeah, and Marco, are you gonna like pick up the questions from the chat and direct them to us?
Yeah, and throw them to you guys.
I think that would be the easiest. Okay, good.
That's good. So yeah.
Then I'd say let's just wait until like people.
A couple more minutes.
How many people are we expecting to have like watching?
Well, so from what the Future Conference people told me is live stream is not that many, but people who look back because of the time difference, it's quite a lot.
Sure.
So yeah. So yeah.
So I'll mute myself for a second. I'll be right.
Okay, sounds good. Live stream is not.
Sorry, that was me.
Okay. All right, are you guys ready to kick it off then? Everyone ready? Sounds good. All right. Well, thank you so much, everyone, for joining us. We're really excited to be here today delivering this workshop on multilateral negotiations. We're going to be addressing sort of what are the key issues sticking out in the current multilateral agenda, how that hinders multilateral negotiations. And we couldn't have more brilliant speakers to help us with that. So to kick it off, I'm going to introduce myself and then pass it on to Daniel, and then Daniel to David, and then David to Dushan. Basically, hi guys, my name is Marco Garcia. I'm currently a third-year international student at the University of Edinburgh. I also have the honor of being the president of Model WTO Edinburgh. If you'd like to find out about what Model WTO is, we're going to speak about that a little bit later. But couldn't be more happy to be here. Interesting conversation coming along. And I'm going to pass it on to Danny now.
Thanks, Marco. Well, yeah, first of all, thank you for the invitation. Super interesting topic. Definitely very important, at least right now, in the international political agenda. So from my side, I'm Daniel. I finished my bachelor's at the University of St. Gallen in business administration, currently working for the Liechtensteinische Landesbank in Vaduz, Liechtenstein, and finishing at the same time my master's degree in business innovation. Together with David, we founded Model W2 International about 3 years ago, for which we have set up a certain platform for different communities interested in international trade and international trade negotiations, specifically to come together and negotiate as if they were at the WTO.
Okay, then I think it's going to be my turn. So my name is David. As Daniel, I am Swiss as well. I studied in St. Gallen. I did my undergrad there. I'm an economics student. And now just moved 2 months ago to Sweden, to Stockholm, to do my master's in economics at the Stockholm School of Economics. As Daniel said, about 3 years ago, we founded Model W2 International together, but you're going to hear more about that later on. And I was the president and head organizer of the Model WTO conference in St. Gallen in 2008, if I'm not mistaken. And 1 year before me, Daniel was the president. Maybe a bit about me, like I used to work on the Swiss Embassy in Buenos Aires last year. I did an internship there, but I also did several internships in the private sector. Yeah, so a bit of everything. And yeah, now I'd like to hand over to Dusan, our colleague from Belgrade.
Thank you, David. Thank you for this introduction. And I'm also very delighted to be here. Thank you, Marco, for the invitation. I'm very happy that we will discuss these interesting topics today. As David said, so I'm Dusan, I'm from Belgrade, Serbia. I have a bachelor's degree in economics here at the Faculty of Economics, Finance and Administration in Belgrade. And I'm starting to study for the master's degree this year, so this fall, very soon. And just a little bit more about myself. I also have like a lot of experience in different sectors, in also like private and public sector, but also like in finance, marketing, and other departments. And most notably last year, I was working in Deutsche Investitions- und Entwicklungsgesellschaft in Cologne, Germany, and translated to English, it's German Investment Cooperation. So yes, once again, very happy to be here, and I'm looking forward to our discussions.
Perfect. Thank you, guys. And again, thank you so much for agreeing to participate in our workshop today. Also, shout out to the Future Conference for giving us the opportunity to deliver this workshop with you guys. But let's talk more about something that's come up quite a lot, Model W2 International. Maybe that David and Daniel, who are the co-founders of this, can give us a little bit more insight on what it is. Why did you decide to do this? And I think most importantly, how it can help the future or the next generation of trade negotiators.
Sure, I think I'm going to start off here. So I think first we should quickly explain what is Model WTO and where did it start. So Model WTO used to be a single conference simulating the ministerial negotiations of the World Trade Organization. And this conference takes place yearly in St. Gallen in Switzerland. That's where Daniel and I did our undergrad. And the conference exists since 1997. And basically every year, people from all over the world come together. And it's a really diverse pool of participants to learn about the WTO and also to go to the WTO in Geneva to meet ambassadors and so on. And what kind of happened is that every time we organized the conference, after the conference, people approached us, mostly participants, and asked us like, hey, this was super cool. We would like to do something similar at our home university. Can you help us with that? And as there was no organization supporting other initiatives by doing this, Daniel and I actually decided that we could set up this international umbrella organization to kind of support other students in organizing conferences all over the world. And this has several benefits because, first of all, it's not so easy to travel to Switzerland. It can be quite costly depending on where you live and how far you have to travel. And by setting up a whole network of organization or of conferences, we can reach more people and more people can learn about international trade and about multilateral diplomacy. So this was in 2008, 2017, when we started that. And since then, actually, quite a lot happened. And I think I'll pass on to Daniel because he's in a better place to explain a bit what happened over the last 3 years.
Thanks, David. Yeah, so maybe to add what David said before, of course, in Switzerland, when the original conference started, we were in a quite privileged position, being very close to the actual WTO organization in Geneva, which helped us a lot. Yet the WTO has a policy, understandably, as many international organizations have, which is that they do not support local projects just because they do not want to make preferences to which local projects they can support and cannot support. And then together with the interest that David was talking about people around the world asking us, hey, we would like to organize this in our countries. That's how we started Model WTO International, with, of course, the additional benefit of the WTO now officially being able to support us due to being officially an international organization now. Now, of course, this had to be built up, and within the last 3 years, we have managed to build 6 other conferences around the world, including Serbia, where Dusan was the head organizer. We've organized one in Tunis. We've organized one in currently being organized in Mexico. There is one in Costa Rica, and of course in Edinburgh. And I think we have managed to build relatively good network. Currently a little bit on hold due to the whole coronavirus. Yet we have seen like a lot of success stories through our time, including a lot of people who would have actually moved on afterwards to work either with the WTO directly or with different organizations related to the WTO, including the missions to the WTO and other international organizations.
That's great. I'm just gonna bring it back together with you. Sounds great. Like I said, this has been quite beneficial for especially people interested in the WTO who are not able to make the trip to Switzerland, whether it's financial reasons or others. Maybe Dusan, you can maybe tell us, I think you were one of the very first model WTOs that were established around the world and in Europe, of course. Can you tell us about your experience and what key takeaways we can take from participating in a conference like Model WTO Belgrade?
Yes, thank you, Marco. So basically, I think that the conference in Belgrade, the one that I'm currently the president of, Model WTO Belgrade, was the first conference after the one in Switzerland, at least the one formally part of the Model WTO International. And like kudos goes to Ksenia, my very dear colleague and friend, who was the one who initiated this together, obviously with Daniel and David, who formed the Model WTO International. So she had kind of an idea to organize the conference in Belgrade because she's obviously studying here. And she gathered a group of students from Belgrade who kind of organized the first Model WTO Belgrade in 2018 with the help of Model WTO International. And I think it was like a huge success. Me personally, I wasn't a part of the organization. However, I found out about the conference and I decided to join. So I was a delegate first year, was lucky enough to win the Best Delegate Award. And then next year, so last year, I was already in the organization. Actually, I joined in the October 2018, I think, if I recall well. So yeah, the one in Belgrade kind of maybe started everything with the international appeal, but after that, as Daniel and David said, there are so many other conferences, and I think it's very important to have this kind of international network. We all can help each other, and we all are kind of inspiring each other. So for me personally, it was one of the best experiences in my life, and I'm so glad that I was able to later on head organize the conference last year, so in 2019, which was also very international, at least here in Belgrade. And as Danny said, like this year, it's very difficult for all the conferences because of the corona pandemic and everything going on. So there is either a possibility to have it online or not to have it at all. And I guess it's very challenging for the organization, like for the entire network, when you have in mind that the entire network has only been going on for a couple of years, for like 3 or 4 years. So now to have this, but I think we are just gonna have it just to be even stronger after this entire like thing ends, hopefully soon.
I'm maybe gonna jump in here quickly because Dusan raised a very interesting point. It's basically, you told us what you learned from participating and then organizing the Model WTO, and I think that's a very good point to talk about quickly. Maybe like we can all share our experience, what we learned and what we think that makes the conferences unique and what it helps you later. So, I mean, first of all, I think it's an amazing opportunity to learn about how the World Trade Organization or how multilateral diplomacy works in general, because you really have to get to know the topic and how the organization functions in order to be a good negotiator for the country that you're representing. So there is kind of, you cannot just pretend that, you know, really have to study it and to get in it. And then you also get to apply it, which is a lot more fun. And you actually see how things work and if things work out. So it's a lot more applied and more fun. And I think what also is a very good skill you can learn is public speaking and how to phrase your opinion and make convincing arguments and statements. Because the biggest part of the conference is about negotiating with other representatives, and it's about building alliances and about finding consensus. And there, sometimes the nuances of your arguments can make huge differences. And I think it kind of, you can learn how to phrase statements in a way that everyone can agree and that you actually find a solution. So I think this is a very good skill that you can learn as well. And you also touched up on this. Most of our conferences are very, very international. So at the oldest conference in St. Gallen, we usually have around 70 participants, and they usually come from over 50 different countries from all over the world. And it is really diverse. So just as an example, we had last year, or during my conference, if I remember, we had people from Nepal, but also people from Australia, Switzerland, from all of the continents, which I thought was a very beautiful experience to work together with those people. And you can learn a lot from each other because everyone has a different background and brings in different views and ideas, which I thought very, very beneficial. And then lastly, that's not really a skill you learn, although I guess you learn it as well, but it's the network that you gain from it. I mean, just the thing that we're now here together in this conference is also a product of this whole organization. And it happened several times to me that when I just traveled around, I met people again from conferences, and they could show me around. I mean, this is more in a leisure oriented way, but also professionally. For example, during my internship in Buenos Aires, I had contact with people that I met at the conference, and it was very beneficial for my work as well. So this is also definitely one of the positive points, at least in my opinion.
Yeah, absolutely. Actually, if I may here, I think personally for me, one of the main key points that I took from having the privilege of going to the conference in Switzerland, I think when people hear about it being a simulation, you don't necessarily think that, you know, like what I'm doing is sort of that just simulation. It doesn't really go beyond that. I think with Model WTO, I think that's what makes it really special. What you do in a way does matter, and what you're talking about, it has relative importance. I remember being, and especially if you go to Switzerland, you know, when I went there, I was blown away by the fact that we went to the WTO headquarters. You spoke to real life ambassadors. You spoke to people who do this every single day. And most importantly, the topics that are chosen by the team have real life implications. So it's stuff that the WTO is currently talking about, which I found incredibly beneficial. And also the end product, you're supposed to produce a document at the end of the conference, and you get a lot of good feedback on it from experts at the WTO. And I feel like that is not something that you come across with other type of simulations. So absolutely, if anyone is thinking of doing a Model WTO, whether it's in Edinburgh, in Belgrade, in Switzerland, or whichever one's closest to you, I could not recommend it more. But yeah, let's talk more about sort of what we're here for, which is, you know, public speaking and negotiation, especially at the international arena. Maybe Dusan, you can help us with that. Let's take the WTO as an example. How is the WTO able to achieve international consensus, especially because it's 160 plus members? it's all consensus based. Therefore, you need all members to agree to in order to pass anything. How plausible is that? Is that a plus? How do negotiators further that?
Well, thank you, Marco, for this question. I would have many things to add to what everyone already said, but let's start first with the question and hope to answering the question, and hopefully I'll get to say something about the other topics as well. So basically, it's extremely difficult to reach a consensus. So the World Trade Organization is in this way much different than some other international organizations, especially because it's concerning the trade. Trade is one of the trickiest parts of any country, so nobody wants others to kind of push any agenda that they don't like, because it's definitely connected to their economy, which is like one of the most super important. So one of the ideas of the World Trade Organization and its decision-making process, it's this single undertaking and like reaching consensus. So there's no agreement, no semi-agreement until like everyone agrees, especially for the most important decisions. Reaching a consensus in general is very difficult. Like the thing that we always say to our delegates in the model WTO, whether it's Belgrade, whether it's the conference in St. Gallen, or what like any other, is that it's very difficult, and it's not the point to always reach a consensus if you can't agree on something. So it's important just to like kind of stand for the ideas you want. So it has to be beneficial, or pretty much at least neutral for everyone, in order for everyone to agree and to kind of introduce some new agreements on topics. So as I said, like we always tell them, it's difficult now when there's only like 12 countries represented, because obviously the model WTO conferences are pretty much simplified. There's never like 164 countries which are actually member states of the organization. And then imagine when there's like 160 countries plus that have to agree on one certain topic. So yeah, it's very difficult. You also have to have like good negotiators, and you also have to find something that's like good for everyone. So for example, like one of the recent important decisions and like agreements in the WTO trade facilitation agreement. So basically, like almost all countries realize that there is a big problem, there's a big challenge with red tape and bureaucracy. So they just wanted to kind of simplify everything and get it easier, because it's very costly. Like the entire trade process is very costly, especially for the small and medium-sized enterprises, which are one of the key elements of any economy, like some of the biggest economies, such as in the European Union, but especially for the smaller countries, least developed countries, like small and medium-sized enterprises are pretty much crucial for the economy. And as I said, so it was very costly. Pretty much everyone agreed that the bureaucracy and the red tape should kind of be reduced, and it could be beneficial for everyone. But even now, the trade facilitation agreement is only ratified by the 2/3 of the member states, and not everyone. And even, as I said, even though it's very beneficial for everyone, so it's so difficult to reach a consensus. And we need a lot of time and a lot of energy, like all the countries, in order to finally reach any kind of agreements.
If I may add to that, I think you have to differentiate between two parts of international negotiations, which is the approaches that the WTO has taken compared to the approach that the UN has taken. Within the international negotiations, what we see is this trade-off between having a consensus and trying to for everybody to keep actually to the rules, and you have the other one where is trying to get a majority, but then not all the rules are being kept by the organizations. And this is exactly what you see, the big difference between the WTO and the UN, right? There is this trade-off, and while the UN can say that there is a lot of very important agreements, very relevant to to international negotiations that set the basis for a lot of laws, for a lot of things that happen. You can also see that the amount of infringements on these laws that have been set by the UN are extremely high. While on the other side, you have the WTO, which has a consensus basis approach, which makes it, like Dusan said, so much harder to get to an agreement. But once you get to an agreement, you can generally assume that most of the countries will hold to it. And there is a very, very good process of how countries can bring lawsuits against each other through the settlement process set up by the WTO. So I think you have to differentiate between these two, and this is where you come to the big discussion between multilateral and plurilateral trade agreements, or agreements in general, where we can almost go into a philosophical talk about which one is better. And I think this is the starting point that you have to know going into any of these international organizations, what is the trade-off that they're taking.
Absolutely, I couldn't agree more. I think also what matters, or what is sort of the sticking point in this sort of negotiations, is that very thin line between national interests and the wider interest of everyone. So for example, the wider international agenda. And that's something that really sticks out in, like you said, organizations like the WTO, where it's a more unified approach. It's a more no one left behind sort of approach. I think a perfect example of that, we can give it a contemporary focal point of view, is the COVID vaccine. So as you know, any sort of pharmaceutical or medical developments are patented, they're protected by international intellectual property law. But what has been sticking out recently in light of COVID has been, well, do we want to do that? I think our priority is to make the vaccine or any medications related to COVID as accessible to everyone as possible. And I think that's, for example, where Article 21 of the GATT agreement comes out, where, and even of the TRIPS, where any sort of, there are national security exceptions to the development of, or to make an exception for these rules. David, do you have any take on this?
On this specific matter, not really, actually. So I don't know if some of the other would like to comment on that.
Yeah, I think basically there's another topic that Marco just touched upon, this national security clause that the WTO implemented in pretty much all of their agreements, which is we cannot talk about like the same way that the UN that we were talking about, that there was a high inefficiency in the sense of how countries keep to the agreements. The WTO with a consensus basis approach has also a lot of problems, which is exactly what Marco said. In order to be able to reach these agreements, there have to be a lot of exceptions set up, which target a lot of different countries, especially this national security clause utilized like very often, very recently. Probably one of the best examples is by the US. There is, for example, for this whole TikTok approach, what the US did with TikTok, for example, is technically banning a company which they, in like according to WTO laws, they were not allowed to do. However, they invoked the national security clause, saying that they're doing this because they're afraid that data of their own citizens is going away, which allows them, according to WTO laws, to do this, which then brings into question, and I think it's a very fair question, is how effective are actually these laws if the majority is either soft law, which means you cannot actually enforce it, or if all of them have so many exceptions that countries can get to it. And I think we get once again to this philosophical question of is it worth it to have these agreements or just not try at all, right? And this is why currently I think it's a very interesting time, especially with the pandemic and everything, where the international community is having to rethink their approach to international negotiations, especially in the WTO, and to rethink about this like getting a style of reform in order to make the agreements more effective than they are currently being implemented.
Yeah, of course. You're absolutely right. I think also the format, sort of the negotiations affect the process in itself. So I think currently in the world that we live in, we have sort of three choices that affect this process. So we can make our process to be inclusive. So it involves all the states such as the WTO. We can make it exclusive, for example, a G20 type forum, or we can make it inclusive and inclusive forum. So for example, the Security Council decisions within the UN that affect absolutely everyone, they're binding decisions. Great, yeah. And finally, I would like to ask you guys, and everyone can pitch in on this, what are the current challenges that you guys see in finding consensus due to the rise of skepticism around globalization, the decline of multilateral trade, versus regional trade? The US is a great example of that, and the pandemic. What are the current challenges that you guys see right now? How can our generation overcome this? And most importantly, what should we be aiming to do that we're currently not doing? Who would like to take the lead on this? Maybe you, Dushan?
Okay, well, first of all, I would just like to say that it's very important that the World Trade Organization is kind of an organization dominated by its members. So it's basically not dominated by a subgroup. And therefore, it's always a good thing. It's always a good thing that everyone is represented, that everyone is important, everyone's opinions, objectives, or interests. So also now, like concerning this particular questions with the challenges and everything going on, I mean, this year was crazy for everyone. It was crazy for every aspect of life and also for trade and for the economy. Basically, it's very difficult to predict anything. I would like to say that I believe that this kind of deglobalization, or just like deteriorated globalization and deteriorated kind of multilateral diplomacy is nothing new. It's been going on for quite some time now, for a couple of years. We've all known what's been happening like in China, in the US, and in general, like concerning trade. And now the pandemic comes this year and kind of just further backs up everything that's been going on and exacerbates and brings new challenges within. I would just like to maybe point out what I personally think is one of the biggest challenges. I'm not sure that the other colleagues will like kind of mention it because it's maybe too particular, but I've been thinking about this a lot recently, and it's also something that the World Trade Organization kind of had in mind as well in some of the recent opinions that they shared. And it's concerning e-commerce, because the current situation with the pandemic, it kind of changed the way we work and do and live. And e-commerce is becoming like more and more important, especially now in these challenging times. And I think that there's need for new kind of agreements concerning this particular topic, which will kind of change very soon, and like everything gets digitalized, and this will undoubtedly change the entire trading process in the future. So I think it's very important to also kind of focus on this as one of the topics that can also be a solution, but is becoming more and more of a challenge at the time.
So maybe I can also let you know about my opinion about what Marco asked us. So what are the current challenges? And then I will also comment on what Dushan said. So I mean, the current challenges, I think it is not new challenges, or the challenges are not new. They've been here for a long time. And in my opinion, it concerns the World Trade Organization as it is organized itself, or in general, because there is a huge debate about if the World Trade Organization is actually working at the moment, or if it's more like they're just to be nice. Because when you look at the outcomes of the World Trade Organization, actually they have not been very, very successful with multilateral trade agreements over the past years, not at all. And many countries actually criticize the World Trade Organization, some of them for that it is not flexible enough, not dynamic enough, not fast enough in reacting to the challenges that we're facing. And actually also more and more countries, or some countries, let's say, feel that the rules are not in their favor, and then they're treated in an unfair manner, which then again brings in political pressure on the organization, which is also something that I think we see increasing, like political pressure from other areas than trade, coming into trade and using trade or tariffs as a measure of global politics. So I think this is definitely a newer challenge, but it was there before. So it's not completely new, but it became more important. And I mean, well, if you look at it, I think the very most important challenge for the WTO at the moment is one is the appellate body. I'm not sure how many judges are left, but not enough to keep it up and running, or soon there will be not enough. So there has to be a solution, because without the appellate body, it will be difficult actually for the WTO to work, at least on this side. And then also the budget. So if I remember it correctly, the budget was only decided for last year in December. For 1 year instead of 2 years, which actually also is kind of having an impact on the continuity and the future prospects of the WTO. Not that it's going to disappear because of a lack of funding, but the process of negotiating the budget last year in January and December took up quite a lot of time. And during this time, the WTO was running perfectly, but the WTO was running in a reduced form, let's say. So I think this is really a challenge. But I agree with Dusan that there is a need for new agreements with e-commerce, especially in services, in my opinion. But I want to also talk about opportunities, maybe. I think the World Trade Organization, I mean, there is a big question if they should do that or not, expand into other areas. But one idea that I think is interesting, at least to think about, is that the World Trade Organization could actually help enforce regulations on climate friendly production, which I think is a very interesting idea to pursue. But then it becomes very, not philosophical, but it depends on your point of view on what the job of the World Trade Organization is. And I think this is up to everyone. But yeah, so I'll hand over to Daniel then.
So yeah, I think your question was very, very broad, Marco, in the sense you have to deconstruct it a little bit, right? The first part is all the negotiations happening around international trade, and I think I cannot add much more than what Dusan and David have already talked about. But I think the other thing, and I see this at least as one of the biggest challenges, comes from far beyond that. Globalization, as we know it nowadays, has been happening within the last maybe 30, 40, if I go far, 50 years. Before that, we've lived in a society for hundreds of years in which most of the countries were looking at their own interests. Now moving suddenly from all looking for themselves to moving into a world where technically for any negotiation or a world that is so interconnected that you have to consider also what other people are doing, because that will affect you. This is the case of international trade. This isn't the case of climate change. There is a lot of examples for this. It brings one of the biggest challenges in general negotiations, international negotiations currently, which is how do we change the mindset, and how do we change the basic components that were set when these international organizations first got started into a much more dynamic one. And I think the Corona pandemic has just been a catalyst of this dynamism that is needed. We saw the case of the WHO, which was criticized quite a lot because they took relatively long until they declared it a pandemic. But the problem is I don't think it was their fault. You know, it's a whole decision-making process where I think the structure which is also reflected in the WTO, it's reflected in the UN, it's reflected in other international organizations, is not done in order to work dynamically. And so there's two parts here. First of all, it's a lot of going from a path where countries are thinking about themselves a lot into moving where they have to really think in combination with others. I think the EU is a very good example in the sense of cooperation. Of course, it has a lot of trouble. It has a lot of criticism as well, but it has shown a very interesting approach to this international or this globalization. But on the other side, you have the structures itself, where you have to rethink about reforming all these international organizations. And I think that's what David was talking about, into moving maybe into sustainability. Basically, this is a reform. This is a rethinking of what these international organizations were originally supposed to do and how they should develop in the future. And I think these are the biggest challenges from my side, at least, and on a macro perspective. Of course, you can always go into details, but the first one is a mindset and the second one is the structures.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the three of you touched upon a really key point, which is need of reformation and rethinking of international organizations. We can take as a case study the WTO. It's not in a good place right now. Mistrust between its members, tensions between once close allies on the rise, questions about the operability and relevance of the WTO in our current system. And these questions have risen in other organizations such as NATO, the UN, WHO, as Danny rightly pointed out. I think my questions for you guys would be, what is the trend now? In light of COVID, do you guys think that, at least for the foreseeable future, should we expect for a make or break moment where organizations either really revamp their systems, or we see this unfortunate trend towards, isolation and nationalism, as we've seen in populist countries such as Mexico, the United States, etc.?
Good, very difficult question to answer, to be honest. I can just tell you how I feel about it, because I think it is too early to know where this is going. If you look at it on the one hand side, we saw nationalistic trends increasing during the corona pandemic, also with certain infringements of international trade contracts. One example was, for example, Germany blocked a shipment of hygiene masks that was destined to Switzerland and just was going through Germany. That was not possible, or that was an infringement of an international trade agreement. But we've seen several such infringements all over the world, and that countries think more about themselves first. But I think it is too early to make a conclusion, because what we also saw is that how interconnected our world is and all the benefits that we actually have from them, because now that we don't have it, sometimes you only value something when you don't have it anymore. So I think this is also something that happened a lot. What this will have, or the impact of this on international organizations, I think it is, at least in my opinion, too early to tell how and in which direction this is going to go. But maybe my colleagues have some other ideas on that.
Well, first of all, I just have to agree with David that now we're just starting to realize how good we had it before, like before the pandemic, how many benefits does our interconnected, as David said, world brings us. It's as he already said, I mean, it's so difficult to predict anything now. As I already said before, I think there was already a trend that's only being further kind of empowered by this entire situation. And it's only normal when there are crises, when there are challenges, that not only countries, people as well, like everyone starts kind of concentrating first on themselves and then thinking about others. So I think it was just first couple of moments when it was very difficult for some countries, for example, Germany, Italy, and I'm not sure who else as well, that there were kind of some not, maybe not the most beneficial decisions for others, but for themselves first. Even though it's so difficult to predict, I still think that the only way forward for everyone, for the world, is unification, and kind of working together, supporting each other. So there has to be some kind of organization to set it up, regardless if it's about economy or if it's about some other aspect. So for economy and trade, obviously World Trade Organization. However, I do believe that not only now with this entire situation, but also in the previous years, it was so obvious that there's a need for some kind of reshaping, some kind of redirecting, and some kind of big alteration and change that's needed. And that's only going to improve further improve our multilateral work. So yeah, I think that we have to work together, and there has to be an organization in the future. I don't believe that there will be isolation. As I said, it's difficult to predict anything, but I think that everyone is aware of the benefits we have with these sorts of organizations, and there just isn't any other way. So let's be hopeful that it's going to be positive in the end.
Yeah, I think if I add to that, it's a very tough question to answer, just because anything I say will be speculation. I don't know if I'm the correct person to talk to necessarily give you an objective point on that, but I think something that you definitely have to consider is that with this globalization that is happening, there is nowadays much more interdependencies between other factors that sometimes we stop considering. So what David and Dusan were talking about, for example, this increase in nationalism and in support for right-wing parties and stuff like that. This is not something that's the first time it happens. You know, it always happens due to some type of social problems, and I think it more than anything shows that there's currently something that just isn't working. What it is, I could not tell you. It could be maybe the fact of social media polarizing the people. It could be a lack of or a feeling of lack of importance for the people, that they think that their leaders are not thinking enough about themselves. It could be very, very different topics, but I think what you have to consider is just what are these triggers, and you have to see them not as individual parts, but like as a combination of a whole, you know. And especially nowadays, you cannot just talk about the US without talking about the international trade environment or negotiation environment, the same way as you cannot talk about China alone or Russia alone or the EU alone. And I think this is just pretty much reiterating what David and Dusan were saying. It's this need to change a little bit the mindset of how you approach these international negotiations, and I think the fact that there are these right-wing movements and nationalist movements is actually quite important. And don't get me wrong, I cannot say that I support them, but I think it's important because it shows that there's currently something that is missing, or there's currently something that is not working correctly, and this is what afterwards will bring politicians to move towards a solution that works for all.
I agree. Adding from my point of view, like you guys said, everything is speculation. At this point, we can't really predict what's going to happen, especially with how volatile the situation is at the moment. I think personally, the problem that we've been having on a multilateral level is, I think we see that strengthening enforcement mechanism can often be seen as sort of like a solution to everything, right? The problem with that I see is that strong enforcement mechanisms, they have the result primarily of, yes, they drive parties to reach agreements, but more like shallow agreements or no agreements at all. I think that sometimes actually the best option might be for states to choose relatively deep agreements with weak enforcement mechanisms, which is sort of like how the UN operates, to create consensus. So this goes to sort of an overarching point about successful agreements. I think agreements are not successful because they feature specific design elements. They're actually just more likely to succeed when design elements complement one another and they reflect the constraints of the political environment in which they're negotiated in, which is why, for example, the UN and the WTO reach agreements on which different sort of mechanisms and enforcement mechanisms. All right, I think that is all we have time for. Once again, guys, thank you so much for joining us. Super interesting conversation. And to everyone watching, again, thank you very much for joining us today. We'll be uploading the video on the Future Conference YouTube channel. So for everyone who was not able to see it, you're welcome to look back. Yeah, thank you guys. We'll see